All right, let's continue with our coverage, and I'm joined by eNCA's Thuba Vilane, who is in our Durban studios, and we also expect that there'll be an urgent cabinet meeting, which has been called, provincial cabinet, that is, a meeting that has been called by KZN Premier Sihle Zikalala. But in the build-up to that, Thuba, you've been getting reflections from people that, walked in the shadow of His Majesty King Goodwill Zwelithini Zulu and assisted him in a number of ways. Tell me about the conversation you had with Oting Umalo, the former King's speech writer.
When I had the chance to speak to Ubaba Prof Oting Umalo, is one of the people that worked very closely with Isilo Sababandla, His Majesty the King, and at the time he was the speechwriter of the King, so which means he has a lot of experience and knowledge and understanding about the way the King addresses his masses or his people. Part of the things that he said is that almost in everything and everywhere the King will go, he will be preaching peace and harmony within the province of KwaZulu-Natal. I was listening now to Lasizo when we were speaking to the Minister for Cooperative Governance, talking about the role of the King during the time of transition in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. As you understand that we're coming from the dark days where there were fights between mostly the IFP and the ANC, and the King, being the leader of in the province, took a stand, and he was able to have an engagement and a conversation between the two reigning factions and warring factions, where we saw a number of leaders sitting down and talking to the King. But let's listen to Prof. Oting Umalo explaining and share some of what the King stood for.
The King has always stood for harmony, for peace, for progress, for prosperity, and for accepting one another as human beings, and insists that for this to happen, our values should be upheld, our values should always guide us, and he is on record as having warned people under his reign to uphold values and habits, good habits, to be always respectful.
The current Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Sihle Zikalala, is calling an urgent meeting of the provincial cabinet. Of course, the context is that fine balancing act, giving due recognition to the institution of traditional leadership and to the King, while at the same time giving recognition to the constitutional democracy and all its tenets that govern a province such as KwaZulu-Natal, the country, South Africa. In that context, many of the government leaders will be reflecting about the working relationship they had, as we heard Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma there reflecting the relationship between government leaders and the King. You've been speaking to the former Premier. What has he been telling you?
Like you are saying to Lasizwe, the King worked with almost everyone, especially leaders of government leaders in the country. I was looking at some of the footages where the King met the former president, Nelson Mandela, and there were also times where he had he sat down with the former president, Thabo Mbeki. We understand that they spent a lot of time with the former president Zuma, as he also comes from this province, and as well as the current president, President Ramaphosa, just after the election of the top six of the ANC, they all visited the King at his palace in Ulundi, where the King also will also give them his guidance on what the country expects from them and the people expect from them. As you said, I spoke to a person that is almost of the same age with the king. That's the former Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Ubaba Willis Mchunu. Besides being the politician, they also grew up together. As you'll know that Isilo, or the king, his mother, at some point he lived in Mkumbane here in Ekatomena next to Chesterville, where also the former Premier Willis Mchunu also grew up. So being growing up at the same age at that time, surely they shared a lot of things. But after the fights within the province, Babu Willis Mchunu was part of the delegation that had to come to the province and engage the king so that members of the ANC will be able to be welcome and be able to work across the province. And another thing that when we had a chance to speak to Uba Willis Mchunu spoke about is the issue of Umkhosi Womhlanga, the reed dance ceremony, which was revived by the late king, and he championed that ceremony where we see thousands of young women going for virginity testing, and then that also played a huge role in the fight against HIV and AIDS in the province. But let's listen to Ubaba, former Premier of the province, Willis Mchunu, explaining.
The conflict between the ANC and the IFP did create a consternation from both sides. The IFP would perceive the ANC as its enemy, and the ANC would perceive the IFP as its enemy. During those times, I also know that the Royal House could have been somewhat affected. But one of the things the ANC had to debate was, should the ANC really regard the royal family as its enemy as well? And clearly for us, our interpretation was no. We cannot say because umntwana waphindangene is part of the royal family, being born within the royal family, having grown up within the royal family. We shouldn't say because he is the leader of the IFP and there is a misunderstanding between the IFP and the ANC, then the royal family should be part of it. We should not make it a part. And we were assisted by the king himself.
You're watching eNCA. Thank you for that. That's eNCA's Thuba Vilane out there in Durban for us.